Sarah Martinez woke up every morning at 6:30 a.m. to the sound of her old alarm clock. The small apartment she shared with her roommate Jessica was quiet in the early hours. Sarah would get up, brush her teeth, and put on her work uniform. The green apron and cap made her look like any other coffee shop worker in the city. At 19 years old, Sarah had simple dreams. She wanted to finish her classes at the community college and maybe become a teacher someday. She was not the kind of person who expected big things to happen to her. Her life was normal and safe, just the way she liked it. The coffee shop where Sarah worked was called Morning Brew. It sat on the corner of Main Street and Oak Avenue. The shop was small but cozy, with wooden tables and soft music playing in the background. Sarah had been working there for almost 2 years. She knew the names of most customers and how they liked their coffee. Every day was pretty much the same. Sarah would make coffee, take orders, and clean tables. She smiled at customers and made small talk about the weather. The work was not exciting, but it paid for her college classes and helped with rent. Sarah was grateful to have a job that fit around her school schedule. Sarah's boss, Mr. Peterson, was a kind man in his 50s. He had owned the coffee shop for 10 years. He liked Sarah because she was always on time and never complained about working extra hours. Sometimes when the shop was slow, Mr. Peterson would let Sarah do her homework behind the counter. The customers at Morning Brew were mostly regular people from the neighborhood. There were office workers who rushed in for their morning coffee. College students would sit for hours with their laptops, buying just one small coffee. Elderly people came in the afternoons to read newspapers and chat with friends. Sarah remembered when she was younger, her mother had signed her up for piano lessons. She was 8 years old then. The teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was patient but strict. Sarah learned to read music notes and play simple songs. For 4 years, she practiced every day after school. Her small fingers would stretch across the white and black keys of their old upright piano. But when Sarah turned 12, everything changed. Her father lost his job and money became tight at home. Piano lessons were expensive and they had to stop. Sarah felt sad about it, but she understood. Her parents needed to pay for more important things like food and rent. The piano at home became like old furniture. Sarah's mother would dust it once a week, but nobody played it anymore. Sometimes Sarah would sit on the bench and press a few keys, but she had forgotten most of what she learned. The music book sat closed on top of the piano, gathering dust like old memories. In high school, Sarah focused on her studies. She was a good student who got mostly B grades. She was not the smartest in her class, but she worked hard. Sarah joined a few clubs, but was never the leader or the star. She was happy to be in the background, helping others and doing her part. When it came time for college, Sarah's family could not afford a big university. The community college was cheaper and close to home. Sarah enrolled in general studies, taking classes in English, math, science, and history. She was not sure what she wanted to study, but she figured she would decide later. Living with Jessica helped with expenses. Jessica was studying to be a nurse and worked part-time at a grocery store. The two girls got along well. They would watch movies together on weekends and cook simple meals to save money. Neither of them had much, but they were content. Sarah's daily routine was simple. She would go to classes in the morning, work at the coffee shop in the afternoon, and study at night. On weekends, she worked longer hours at Morning Brew. Sometimes she felt tired, but she never complained. This was her life, and she was making the best of it. The coffee shop had a small radio that played soft music all day. Sometimes classical music would come on, and Sarah would stop what she was doing to listen. The beautiful melodies would remind her of her piano lessons. She would remember the feeling of her fingers moving across the keys and the satisfaction of playing a song correctly, but those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. Sarah had convinced herself that she was never really good at piano. She thought she was just an average student who had taken lessons like many other kids. The idea that she might have real musical talent never crossed her mind. Sarah's co-workers at the coffee shop were nice people. There was Maria, who worked the morning shift and always brought homemade cookies. There was Tom, a college student, like Sarah, who worked evenings. And there was Linda, an older woman who worked part-time and treated everyone like family. The coffee shop was Sarah's second home. She knew where everything was kept and could make any drink on the menu perfectly. Customers often complimented her work, saying she made the best cappuccino in town. Sarah would smile and thank them, but she did not think much about these compliments. Money was always tight for Sarah after paying for rent, school, and basic needs. There was not much left over. She shopped at discount stores and looked for sales. Sarah had learned to live with less and find happiness in small things. A good grade on a test, a kind word from a customer, or a funny movie with Jessica could make her day. Sarah never thought about fame or success. She watched other people on TV and in movies who had exciting lives, but she did not dream of having such a life herself. She was practical and realistic. Sarah believed that people like her had ordinary lives, and that was perfectly fine. The old piano at home stood silent in the corner of the living room. Sarah's parents had talked about selling it to make space, but somehow they never did. It stayed there like a quiet reminder of dreams that had been put aside for more practical concerns. Sarah did not know that her life was about to change completely. She had no idea that sleeping inside her was a musical gift that would soon wake up and amaze everyone, including herself. For now, she was just a 19-year-old girl working at a coffee shop, studying at community college, and living a simple, quiet life. It was a Tuesday morning in October. When everything changed for Sarah, the coffee shop was busier than usual because the weather had turned cold overnight. People wanted their hot drinks before starting their day. Sarah was working behind the counter, making lattes and cappuccinos. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and the espresso machine made its familiar hissing sounds. She was in her usual rhythm, taking orders and preparing drinks with practiced ease. Around 10 o'clock, two women entered the shop. One was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a long black coat and carried herself with confidence. The other woman was younger, probably in her 40s. Dressed in a business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Sarah recognized the older woman. She had seen her in the coffee shop a few times before, but they had never spoken much. The woman always ordered the same thing, a medium coffee with cream, no sugar. She usually sat by the window and read a book or worked on papers. The two women found a table near the back of the shop. Sarah could hear them talking, but she was not trying to listen. She was focused on making drinks for other customers. The morning rush was keeping her busy, but then the older woman's voice got louder. She sounded frustrated about something. Sarah could not help but overhear parts of their conversation. "I cannot believe this happened," the older woman was saying. "The gala is in 2 weeks, and now we have no pianist." The younger woman nodded and looked worried. "What are we going to do? We have already sent out all the invitations. People are expecting live music." Sarah learned later that the older woman was Dr. Elena Rosenberg, a famous pianist and music professor at the university. The younger woman was Michelle Clark, who organized events for the school. Dr. Rosenberg had been planning a charity gala for months. It was a fancy dinner party to raise money for music scholarships. Important people from the city would attend, including business owners, professors, and community leaders. The plan was to have a professional pianist play background music during dinner. The music was supposed to be soft and pleasant, something that would create a nice atmosphere without being too loud or attention-grabbing. But 3 days ago, the pianist they had hired got sick. The doctor said she needed surgery on her hand and would not be able to play for at least 2 months. Dr. Rosenberg had tried calling other professional pianists, but they were all busy or too expensive. "Maybe we could just play recorded music?" Michelle suggested. Dr. Rosenberg shook her head. "No, that would not be the same. This is supposed to be a classy event. We promised live piano music in the invitations." Sarah finished making a customer's order and walked over to clean the table next to where the two women were sitting. She tried not to listen, but their conversation was hard to ignore. "We do not need someone fancy," Dr. Rosenberg continued. "Just someone who can play simple classical pieces. Background music? Nothing complicated. But where are we going to find someone this late? Michelle asked. Dr. Rosenberg sighed. I have been thinking about that. Maybe one of my students could do it, but most of them get too nervous performing in front of important people. Sarah was wiping down the table when she heard Dr. Rosenberg say something that made her stop. At this point, I would take anyone who can play basic piano, even someone who just took lessons as a child. The music is supposed to be in the background. Anyway, Tom, who was working the morning shift with Sarah, had been listening too. He was the kind of person who liked to help everyone and never thought twice before speaking up. Excuse me, Tom said, walking over to the two women. I could not help but hear that you need a piano player. Dr. Rosenberg looked up at him. Yes, we do. Do you play? Tom laughed. No, I cannot even whistle in tune. But Sarah here used to take piano lessons. She is really good. Sarah felt her face turn red. She wanted to disappear. Tom, no, she whispered, but he was already talking. She is too modest, Tom continued. I have heard her humming classical music while she works. She knows all those fancy pieces. Dr. Rosenberg turned to look at Sarah. Her eyes were kind but studying. Is that true? Do you play piano? Sarah felt like everyone in the coffee shop was looking at her, even though most customers were not paying attention. I used to take lessons. When I was little, she said quietly. But that was a long time ago. How long ago? Dr. Rosenberg asked. I stopped when I was 12. I am 19 now. Michelle looked hopeful. But you remember how to play? Sarah nodded slowly. Some things, I guess. Simple songs. Dr. Rosenberg stood up and walked closer to Sarah. What kind of pieces do you remember? Sarah thought for a moment. Well, I used to know Für Elise pretty well, and some Bach pieces. My teacher also taught me Clair de Lune, but that one was harder. Dr. Rosenberg's eyes lit up. Those were exactly the kinds of pieces she had been planning for the gala. Simple, beautiful classical music that everyone would recognize. Would you be willing to play at our event? Dr. Rosenberg asked. It would just be background music during dinner. Nothing fancy or complicated. We would pay you, of course. Sarah's mind was racing. She had not played piano seriously in years. What if she made mistakes? What if she embarrassed herself in front of important people? I do not know, Sarah said. I'm not sure I am good enough for something like that. The music is supposed to be in the background, Dr. Rosenberg explained. People will be talking and eating. They are not expecting a concert performance. Just pleasant music to make the evening nice. Tom was grinning. Come on, Sarah, you should do it. It sounds like fun. Michelle pulled out her phone and showed Sarah some pictures from last year's gala. The photos showed people in fancy clothes, sitting at round tables with white tablecloths. There was a beautiful piano on a small stage. It is a very nice event, Michelle said. And you would be helping us raise money for students who cannot afford music lessons. That last part touched Sarah's heart. She remembered how sad she had been when her family could not afford piano lessons anymore. Maybe she could help other kids who were in the same situation. How long would I need to play? Sarah asked. About 30 minutes, Dr. Rosenberg said. Just while people are having dinner. 5 or 6 songs, maybe 7 if you know that many. Sarah thought about the old piano at home. She had not played it in months, but it was still there. She could practice. I would need some time to get ready, Sarah said. I have not played in a while. The gala is in 2 weeks, Michelle said. Would that be enough time? Sarah took a deep breath. Part of her was scared, but another part was excited. When was the last time she had done something that was not part of her regular routine? Okay, Sarah said before she could change her mind. I will do it. Double quotes. Dr. Rosenberg smiled widely. Wonderful. Let me give you my phone number. We can meet this week to talk about the details. As Dr. Rosenberg wrote down her contact information, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and terror. She had just agreed to play piano at a fancy event for important people. What had she gotten herself into? That evening, Sarah sat in front of the old piano in her living room. The wooden bench creaked as she settled onto it. She had not sat there for months, and the piano looked different somehow. Bigger, more intimidating. Jessica came out of her bedroom and found Sarah staring at the piano keys. "What are you doing?" she asked. Sarah told her roommate about what had happened at the coffee shop. Jessica's eyes grew wide with excitement as Sarah explained about the gala and Dr. Rosenberg. "That is amazing," Jessica said. "You are going to play at a fancy university event?" "I think I made a mistake," Sarah said. "I have not really played piano in years. What if I am terrible?" Jessica sat down next to Sarah on the bench. "You will not know until you try. Play something for me." Sarah's hands felt shaky as she placed them on the keys. She tried to remember Für Elise, the piece she had known best as a child. Her fingers found the first few notes, but they sounded rough and uncertain. She stopped after just a few measures. "See? I told you, I'm not good enough for this." "Sarah, you just started again after years of not playing," Jessica said. Of course it will take some practice. You have 2 weeks. That is plenty of time." The next morning, Dr. Rosenberg called Sarah to arrange a meeting. They met at a small cafe near the university campus. Dr. Rosenberg brought sheet music for 6 pieces she thought would work well for the gala. "These are all pieces you should know," Dr. Rosenberg said, spreading the music across the table. Für Elise, Clair de Lune, Canon in D, Avenue Maria, Moonlight Sonata, First Movement, and Bach's Air on G string. Sarah looked at the sheet music. Some of it looked familiar, but some pieces seemed very complicated. "I am not sure I can learn all of these in 2 weeks, she said. "You do not have to learn them all," Dr. Rosenberg said kindly. "Pick 3 or 4 that you feel most comfortable with. Remember, this is background music. People will be talking and eating. They are not analyzing every note." Sarah studied the music more carefully. Für Elise looked the most familiar. Clair de Lune brought back memories of her childhood lessons. The Bach piece seemed manageable. "I think I can work on these 3, Sarah said, pointing to the sheets. Dr. Rosenberg smiled. "Perfect. And if you feel confident enough to add 1 more, that would be wonderful. But 3 pieces for 30 minutes is fine." They talked about the details of the event. The gala would be held at the university's historic theater. There would be about 150 guests. Sarah would play during the dinner portion of the evening from 7:30 to 8 p.m. "The piano is a beautiful Steinway Grand," Dr. Rosenberg said. "It has a lovely sound. Much better than what you are probably used to." Sarah nodded, but inside she felt more nervous. A grand piano seemed so much more serious than her little upright piano at home. That afternoon, Sarah went to work at the coffee shop, but she could barely concentrate. She kept thinking about the music and wondering if she was crazy to think she could do this. Tom noticed that Sarah seemed distracted. "How is the piano practice going?" he asked. "Not great," Sarah admitted. "I think I bit off more than I can." "Chew. Do not give up before you really try," Tom said. "You have not practiced seriously yet. Give it a week and see how you feel then." When Sarah got home that evening, she sat down at the piano with determination. She opened the sheet music for Für Elise and started from the beginning. Her fingers moved slowly at first, but gradually the muscle memory came back. The first week of practice was frustrating. Sarah could only practice for about an hour each evening after work and school. Her fingers felt stiff and she made lots of mistakes. Sometimes she wanted to call Dr. Rosenberg and tell her she could not do it, but Jessica was encouraging. She would sit and listen while Sarah practiced, offering support when Sarah got frustrated. "That sounded much better than yesterday," Jessica would say. Even when Sarah could only hear the mistakes. By the second week, things started to improve. Sarah's fingers were getting stronger and more flexible. The pieces were coming back to her more easily. She decided to add Canon in D as her 4th piece. Sarah also had to think about what to wear. She had never been to a fancy event before and did not own anything appropriate. Jessica helped her shop at a thrift store where they found a simple black dress that fit well. "You look elegant," Jessica said when Sarah tried on the dress. "Like a real pianist." "I do not feel like a real pianist," Sarah said. "I feel like a girl playing dress-up." The closer the gala got, the more nervous Sarah became. She started having dreams about forgetting the music or playing wrong notes in front of everyone. She would wake up with her heart racing. 3 days. Before the gala, Dr. Rosenberg called to check on Sarah's progress. "How are you feeling about the music?" she asked. "I think I know the pieces," Sarah said. "But I am worried about playing in front of so many people. What if I make mistakes?" "Everyone makes small mistakes," Dr. Rosenberg said. "The key is to keep going and not let it throw you off. Remember, most people do not know these pieces well enough to notice small errors. What if I forget a whole section? Then you skip to a part you remember, or you repeat a section you played well. The audience will not know. They are there to enjoy dinner and conversation, not to judge your piano playing." Dr. Rosenberg's words helped a little, but Sarah still felt anxious. She had never performed in front of anyone except her old piano teacher and her family. The day before the gala, Sarah took the afternoon off from work to practice extra. She played through all 4 pieces several times. They sounded pretty good, but she was still not confident. "I should call Dr. Rosenberg and cancel," Sarah told Jessica. "I am not ready for this." "You are as ready as you can be," Jessica said. "And think about how you will feel if you do not try. You will always wonder what might have happened." That evening, Sarah tried to relax by watching a movie with Jessica, but she could not concentrate. She kept thinking about the next day. What had she gotten herself into? Sarah went to bed early but could not sleep. She lay awake thinking about the piano pieces, going over them in her mind. She imagined herself walking onto the stage and sitting down at the grand piano. In her imagination, sometimes it went well, and sometimes it was a disaster. Finally, around midnight, Sarah got up and went to the piano one more time. She played through Für Elise quietly, trying not to wake Jessica. The familiar melody calmed her nerves a little. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. Sarah had practiced as much as she could. Now she just had to trust that her fingers would remember what to do when it mattered. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah thought about her younger self, the 8-year-old girl who had loved piano lessons. That little girl had never imagined playing at a university gala. Maybe, Sarah thought, she was stronger and braver than she realized. The morning of the gala would bring new challenges. But tonight, Sarah had done everything she could to prepare. Tomorrow, she would find out if it was enough. Sarah woke up on the day of the gala feeling like butterflies were dancing in her stomach. She had barely slept the night before, and when she did sleep, she dreamed about piano keys and formal dresses. Jessica was already awake, making coffee in the kitchen. "Big day today," she said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Sarah answered honestly. "I keep thinking I should call Dr. Rosenberg and make up an excuse to cancel." "You are not going to cancel," Jessica said firmly. "You have worked too hard for this. Besides, you are going to be great." Sarah tried to eat breakfast, but she was too nervous. She managed a few bites of toast and some orange juice. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Sarah could not concentrate on anything. She tried watching TV, but nothing held her attention. Around noon, Jessica helped Sarah get ready. They did her makeup carefully, keeping it simple but elegant. Jessica had borrowed some nice jewelry from her sister, a simple necklace and small earrings that went perfectly with the black dress. "You look beautiful," Jessica said as she helped Sarah with her hair. "Like you belong at a fancy event." "I do not feel like I belong anywhere fancy," Sarah said, looking at herself in the mirror. The girl staring back at her looked more grown-up than usual, but Sarah still felt like the same nervous coffee shop worker inside. At 5 p.m., Sarah drove to the university campus. Dr. Rosenberg had told her to arrive early so she could see the venue and practice on the actual piano she would be using. The university campus was bigger than Sarah had expected. She drove around for 10 minutes before finding the right building. Whitmore Theater was a grand old building with tall columns and wide stone steps leading to the entrance. Sarah parked her small old car between two expensive-looking vehicles. She felt out of place immediately. Her car looked shabby next to the shiny SUVs and luxury sedans. Walking up the steps to the theater entrance, Sarah felt smaller with each step. The building was impressive and intimidating. Large posters by the entrance advertised upcoming concerts and plays. This was clearly a place where important cultural events happened. Inside the theater lobby, Sarah stopped and stared. The ceiling was high with beautiful painted details. A huge crystal chandelier hung in the center, sparkling with hundreds of small lights. The floors were polished marble that reflected the light from above. Red velvet curtains hung along the walls, and elegant furniture was arranged in conversation areas. Everything looked expensive and carefully chosen. Sarah had never been in such a fancy place. "You must be Sarah," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Dr. Rosenberg approaching with a warm smile. She was dressed in an elegant navy blue dress and looked perfectly at home in the grand surroundings. "Welcome to Whitmore Theater," Dr. Rosenberg said. "What do you think?" "It is beautiful," Sarah said, still looking around in amazement. "Much fancier than I expected." "Wait until you see the main theater," Dr. Rosenberg said. "Come, let me show you around." They walked through double doors into the main theater space. Sarah gasped when she saw it. The theater had 3 levels of seating, all covered in the same red velvet as the lobby curtains. The stage was large and impressive, with heavy curtains and professional lighting, but what caught Sarah's attention most was the piano. It sat on the left side of the stage, a magnificent black grand piano that seemed to shine under the stage lights. It was much larger and more beautiful than any piano Sarah had ever seen. "That is a Steinway Model D Concert Grand," Dr. Rosenberg explained, "one of the finest pianos ever made. It has been in this theater for 20 years. Sarah walked closer to the stage, staring at the impressive instrument. "I have never played anything like that," she said quietly. "You will love it," Dr. Rosenberg said. "The touch is very responsive and the sound is incredible. Much easier to play than your upright piano at home." They climbed the steps onto the stage. Up close, the piano was even more impressive. The black surface was polished to a perfect shine, and Sarah could see her reflection in it. "Go ahead," Dr. Rosenberg encouraged. "Sit down and try it." Sarah approached the piano bench nervously. It was much wider than the bench at home, and it could be adjusted up and down. Dr. Rosenberg helped her find the right height. When Sarah placed her hands on the keys, she was surprised by how smooth and responsive they felt. She pressed a few notes gently, and the sound that came out was rich and beautiful. Even single notes sounded amazing. "Try one of your pieces," Dr. Rosenberg suggested. Sarah began playing Für Elise, and immediately noticed the difference. The piano responded to every small movement of her fingers. When she played softly, the sound was gentle and sweet. When she pressed harder, the notes were bold and strong. "This is incredible," Sarah said, stopping after a few minutes. "It sounds so much better than my piano at home." "That is the difference between a fine instrument and an ordinary one," Dr. Rosenberg explained. "This piano will make you sound better than you ever have before." They spent 30 minutes going through Sarah's 4 pieces on the concert grand. Each piece sounded more beautiful than Sarah had ever heard it. The piano seemed to bring out emotions in the music that she had never noticed before. "You sound wonderful," Dr. Rosenberg said when they finished. "I think you are going to surprise yourself tonight." As they left the stage, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. The piano was amazing, but that also made everything feel more serious and important. Dr. Rosenberg showed Sarah the rest of the theater setup. Round tables for 8 people each were arranged throughout the main floor. Each table had white tablecloths, fancy china, and beautiful flower arrangements. The lighting was warm and elegant. "About 150 people will be here tonight," Dr. Rosenberg explained. "Professors, business leaders, community supporters, all people who care about music education." Sarah looked at the empty tables and tried to imagine them filled with important, well-dressed people. The thought made her stomach flutter. With nerves again. What if I mess up in front of all these people? Sarah asked. You will not mess up, Dr. Rosenberg said confidently. And even if you make a small mistake, no one will notice. Remember, they will be eating and talking. The music is supposed to be in the background. A team of workers was setting up the sound system and adjusting the lighting. Everything was being prepared perfectly for the evening. Sarah watched them work and realized how many people were involved in making this event successful. I should probably go home and get ready, Sarah sighed, checking the time. It was 6 p.m., and she needed to be back by 7:15. Yes, take your time getting ready, Dr. Rosenberg agreed. Come back through the stage door on the side of the building. I will be here to meet you. As Sarah walked back to her car, she looked up at the impressive theater building one more time. In just over an hour, she would be sitting on that stage, playing piano for a room full of distinguished guests. The drive home was quiet. Sarah thought about how different her life had become. In just 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, she was just a coffee shop worker taking college classes. Tonight, she would be performing at a university gala. When she got home, Jessica was waiting with excitement. How was it? How did the piano sound? Amazing, Sarah said, and terrifying. The whole place is so fancy, Jessica. I do not know if I belong there. You belong there because you earned your place there, Jessica said. Dr. Rosenberg chose you because she believes in you. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror one more time. The black dress still fit perfectly, and Jessica had done a great job with her hair and makeup. She looked the part of someone who belonged. At a fancy event, but inside, Sarah still felt like the same girl who made coffee every morning and worried about paying rent. Could she really do this? In less than an hour, she would find out. As she drove back to the theater, Sarah tried to calm her nerves by thinking about the beautiful sound of the concert grand piano. If she could just focus on the music and forget about the audience, maybe everything would be okay. The adventure was about to begin. Sarah arrived back at the theater at 7:15 p.m., just as Dr. Rosenberg had instructed. The parking lot was filling up with cars much nicer than hers. Well-dressed people were walking toward the theater entrance, and Sarah could hear the sound of conversation and laughter drifting from inside. She used the side entrance that led directly backstage, as Dr. Rosenberg had shown her earlier. The backstage area was busy with catering staff carrying trays of food and event organizers checking last-minute details. Dr. Rosenberg appeared almost immediately. She was now wearing an elegant black evening gown and looked every bit the distinguished music professor. Sarah, perfect timing, Dr. Rosenberg said. How are you feeling? Nervous, Sarah admitted, really nervous. That is completely normal. Dr. Rosenberg said kindly. Even professional musicians get nervous before performing. The important thing is to use that nervous energy to focus on the music. Through a gap in the stage curtains, Sarah could see the main theater. The tables were now filled with people in formal attire. Men wore dark suits or tuxedos, and women wore elegant dresses and jewelry. The lighting created a warm, sophisticated atmosphere. Sarah had never seen so many important-looking people in one place. She recognized some faces from local newspapers and TV news. These were professors, business owners, doctors, and community leaders, people who seemed to belong in this elegant setting. Remember, Dr. Rosenberg said, they are not here to listen to a concert. They are here to support music education and enjoy a nice dinner with friends. Your music will add to the atmosphere, but you are not the main focus. Michelle Clark, the event organizer, joined them backstage. She looked pleased with how everything was going. The cocktail hour went perfectly, Michelle said. People are starting to sit down for dinner. Sarah, we would like you to begin playing. In about 5 minutes, Sarah's heart started beating faster. This was really happening. In 5 minutes, she would walk onto that stage and sit down at the beautiful grand piano in front of 150 important people. I think I need to use the restroom, Sarah said suddenly. Of course, Dr. Rosenberg said. "Take your time. We will wait for you." In the ladies' room, Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup still looked good, and her hair was still in place. She took several deep breaths and tried to calm her racing heart. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It is just 4 songs, background music. No one is really listening." But even as she said it, Sarah was not entirely convinced. What if she froze up? What if her fingers would not work? What if she forgot the music completely? When she returned backstage, Dr. Rosenberg was waiting with an encouraging smile. "Ready?" Dr. Rosenberg asked. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I will introduce you briefly," Dr. Rosenberg explained. "Then you walk out, sit down, and begin with whichever piece feels most comfortable. Take your time getting settled." Dr. Rosenberg walked onto the stage. The conversations in the theater gradually quieted as people noticed her presence. "Good evening, everyone," Dr. Rosenberg said into a small microphone. "Welcome to our annual Music Scholarship Gala. While you enjoy your dinner, we have a wonderful treat for you. Please welcome Sarah Martinez, who will be providing beautiful piano music for our evening." There was polite applause as Sarah walked onto the stage. The stage lights were brighter than she had expected, and for a moment she could barely see the audience. Her legs felt shaky as she walked to the piano bench. Sarah sat down and adjusted the bench height slightly, just as Dr. Rosenberg had taught her. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. The beautiful sound of the Steinway piano came back to her, and she felt slightly more confident. The audience had returned to their conversations, and the sound of clinking dishes and quiet talking filled the theater. Sarah realized that Dr. Rosenberg was right. People were focused on their dinner and friends, not on her. She decided to start with Für Elise, the piece she knew best. As her fingers found the opening notes, the familiar melody flowed from the piano. The sound was even more beautiful than she remembered from her practice session earlier. Something magical happened as Sarah played. The responsive keys of the grand piano seemed to guide her fingers. Every note came out clear and expressive. The music sounded better than it ever had when she practiced at home. As she moved through the piece, Sarah began to relax. Her fingers found their rhythm and the music became more natural. She was not just playing notes anymore, she was making music. When Für Elise ended, there was a brief moment of appreciative murmurs from the audience, but then conversations resumed. Sarah felt relieved. She had made it through the first piece without any major mistakes. For her second piece, Sarah chose Canon in D. This piece had a gentle, flowing melody that seemed perfect for background music. As she played, she noticed that the conversations in the audience had become slightly quieter. People were not actively listening, but the music was creating a pleasant atmosphere. The beautiful acoustics of the theater made every note ring clearly. Sarah had never heard herself play so well. The grand piano was bringing out qualities in her playing that she did not know existed. During a quiet passage in the canon, Sarah could hear the soft sounds of the dinner service, the gentle clink of wine glasses, the rustle of napkins, the quiet laughter of people enjoying themselves. Her music was blending perfectly with the elegant atmosphere of the evening. As she finished the canon, Sarah felt her confidence growing. 2 pieces down, 2 to go. This was actually going well. For her third piece, Sarah chose Clair de Lune. This had always been one of her favorite pieces, though it was also one of the more challenging ones she had prepared. The opening notes were soft and mysterious, like moonlight on water. As Sarah played the beautiful melody, something special began to happen. The piece seemed to flow through her fingers with an emotion and expression that surprised her. She was not just playing the notes correctly, she was telling a story with the music. The conversations in the audience grew quieter still. Though people were not stopping their dinners to listen, the beautiful music was definitely being noticed and appreciated. Sarah found herself getting lost in the music. The nervousness she had felt earlier was replaced by a sense of joy and connection to the piano. This was what she had loved about playing when she was a child, the feeling that the music was coming from somewhere, Deep inside her, the Steinway piano responded to every subtle touch. When Sarah played softly, the notes were like whispers. When she played with more intensity, the sound filled the theater with rich, warm tones. As Clair de Lune came to its gentle conclusion, Sarah heard something that surprised her. The conversations in the audience had become noticeably quieter. More people seemed to be paying attention to the music, even while continuing their dinners. Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Not only was she playing without making mistakes, but she was actually making beautiful music. The hours of practice had paid off, and the magnificent piano was bringing out the best in her playing. She had one more piece to play, Bach's Air on G string. But before she began, Sarah took a moment to appreciate what was happening. She was sitting on the stage of a beautiful theater, playing a world-class piano for an audience of distinguished people, and it was going better than she had ever imagined possible. The little girl who had taken piano lessons all those years ago would have been amazed to see where those lessons had led. Sarah smiled slightly as she prepared to play her final piece, feeling grateful for this unexpected opportunity to make music again. As Sarah prepared to play her final planned piece, Bach's Air on G string, she felt a confidence she had never experienced before. The first three pieces had gone beautifully, and the magnificent Steinway piano had made her sound better than she ever thought possible. She placed her fingers on the keys and began the gentle, flowing melody of the Bach piece. The music filled the theater with its timeless beauty, and Sarah found herself completely absorbed in the performance. But as she played, something unexpected happened. Deep in her memory, another piece of music began to surface. It was a Chopin nocturne that her childhood piano teacher, Mrs. Johnson, had played for her once during a lesson years ago. Sarah remembered sitting next to Mrs. Johnson on the piano bench, watching her fingers dance across the keys with such grace and emotion. The music had been hauntingly beautiful, more complex and expressive than anything Sarah had learned to play herself. "Maybe someday you will be ready for this piece," Mrs. Johnson had said. "It requires not just technical skill but the ability to express deep emotions through music." As Sarah finished the Bach piece, the Chopin nocturne echoed in her mind. She could hear every note clearly, as if Mrs. Johnson had played it just yesterday instead of 7 years ago. The planned set was over. Sarah was supposed to play 4 pieces, and she had completed them successfully. Dr. Rosenberg had told her to finish after 30 minutes, and she had been playing for exactly that long, but something inside Sarah did not want to stop. The music felt too good, the connection with the piano too strong. The Chopin nocturne was calling to her, and without really thinking about it, Sarah found her fingers moving to the opening notes. The first few measures of the nocturne flowed from the piano like water. Sarah was surprised by how clearly she remembered the piece, considering she had never actually learned to play it herself. But somehow, her fingers seemed to know where to go. The nocturne was much more complex than the pieces she had been playing. It required delicate touch, precise timing, and most importantly, the ability to convey deep emotion through the music. These were skills that Sarah did not know she possessed, but as she continued playing, something extraordinary happened. The music seemed to unlock feelings and abilities that had been sleeping inside her for years. Her fingers moved with a grace and sensitivity that surprised her. The melody sang out from the piano with a beauty that made her heart race. This was different from the background music she had been playing. This was music that demanded attention, music that told a story, music that touched the soul, and the audience noticed. Conversations around the theater began to quiet down. The gentle clink of dishes and glasses became less frequent as people paused to listen. What had started as pleasant background music was becoming something much more powerful. Sarah was completely lost in the music now. She was not thinking about the audience or worrying about making mistakes. She was simply letting the music flow through her, expressing emotions she did not even know she had. The Chopin Nocturne was a piece about longing and beauty, about dreams and lost love. As Sarah played, she felt as if she was telling the story of her own life, the dreams she had put aside, the talents she had buried, The music that had been waiting inside her all these years. Her left hand played the gentle, rolling accompaniment, while her right hand sang the melody with increasing expression and intensity. The dynamic range of the piece allowed her to explore everything from the softest whispers to moments of passionate intensity. The Steinway piano responded to every nuance of her touch. When she played with delicate sensitivity, the notes seemed to float in the air. When she played with more force and emotion, the sound filled every corner of the theater. About halfway through the nocturne, Sarah became dimly aware that the theater had grown very quiet. The sounds of dinner and conversation had nearly stopped, but she was too absorbed in the music to fully process what this meant. She was playing from pure musical instinct now, interpreting the piece with a maturity and insight that should have taken years to develop. Somehow, all the music she had ever heard, all the emotions she had ever felt, were coming together in this moment. The middle section of the nocturne was particularly challenging, with complex harmonies and intricate fingering, but Sarah navigated it with surprising ease, as if her hands had been preparing for this moment her entire life. As the piece moved toward its climax, Sarah played with increasing passion and intensity. The music swelled and built, expressing feelings too deep for words. The beautiful melody soared above the rich harmonies, filling the theater with sound that seemed to touch everyone present. When Sarah reached the final section of the nocturne, she played with a tenderness and sensitivity that brought tears to her own eyes. The music gradually became softer and more intimate. Like a gentle goodbye to a beautiful dream, the last notes of the piece faded into silence, and for a moment, the entire theater was completely quiet. Sarah sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, hardly believing what had just happened. She had played a piece she had never learned, with skill and expression she did not know she possessed. The music had come from somewhere deep inside her, from a place she was only now discovering existed. As the silence stretched on, Sarah began to realize that something important had just happened. This was not the background music she had been hired to play. This was something else entirely, a revelation, a transformation, a glimpse of who she really was underneath her quiet, ordinary exterior. For the first time in her life, Sarah had touched something truly extraordinary within herself. And somehow she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in the theater stretched for what felt like forever. Sarah sat at the piano, her heart beating fast, suddenly aware that something very different had just happened. The background music she had been hired to play was supposed to blend into the dinner conversation, not bring it to a complete stop. Then from somewhere in the audience came the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. One person was applauding, then another joined in. Within seconds, the entire theater erupted in enthusiastic applause. Sarah looked up from the piano keys for the first time since she had started playing the Chopin Nocturne. What she saw amazed her. Every person in the theater was looking at her. Some were standing up, many had tears in their eyes. The applause was not the polite, brief clapping she had expected for background music. This was the kind of applause reserved for truly special performances. Dr. Rosenberg was walking quickly across the stage toward the piano. Her face showed a mixture of amazement, excitement, and something that looked almost like shock. "Sarah," Dr. Rosenberg said, her voice filled with emotion. "That was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary." Sarah felt confused and overwhelmed. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I know I was only supposed to play background music. I do not know what happened. I just started playing that other piece and could not stop." "Sorry?" Dr. Rosenberg repeated, laughing with delight. "My dear, you have nothing to be sorry for. What you just played was one of the most beautiful performances I have heard in years." The applause was still continuing. Sarah looked out at the audience and saw faces full of appreciation and wonder. These were not people politely clapping for adequate background music. These were people who had just witnessed something special. Professor James Hartford, the head of the university's music department, was making his way toward the stage. Sarah did not know who he was, but she could tell from his formal appearance and the way others stepped aside for him that he was someone important. "Doctor," Rosenberg, Professor Hartford said as he climbed onto the stage. Who is this young woman? Where did you find her? This is Sarah Martinez, Dr. Rosenberg replied. She works at a coffee shop downtown. 2 weeks ago, she had not played piano in 7 years. Professor Hartford looked at Sarah with amazement. 2 weeks? You learned the Chopin Nocturne in 2 weeks? I did not learn it, Sarah said, still feeling confused. I mean, I never actually studied it. My old piano teacher played it for me once, years ago. I just remembered it. Professor Hartford and Dr. Rosenberg exchanged meaningful looks. Sarah did not understand what was passing between them, but she could tell it was significant. Sarah, Professor Hartford said gently, what you just did is not normal. Most piano students study for years before they can play Chopin with that level of expression and technical skill. And to play a piece from memory that you heard only once, years ago, is almost unheard of. Other people were approaching the stage. Now, Sarah recognized some faces from earlier in the evening, distinguished guests, professors, and community leaders. They all wanted to meet her and congratulate her on the performance. Mrs. Catherine Williams, a prominent arts patron in the city, was among the first to reach Sarah. My dear, she said, taking Sarah's hands in hers, that was the most moving performance I have heard in this theater in 20 years. Where did you study music? I took lessons as a child, Sarah replied, still feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. But I stopped when I was 12. I have not played seriously until 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Williams looked incredulous. That is impossible. The way you interpreted that piece, the emotional depth, the technical control, that takes years of advanced training. Dr. Margaret Chun, a visiting professor from a prestigious music conservatory, joined the conversation. I have to agree, she said. What I just heard was not the playing of someone with limited training. You have a natural musical intelligence that is extremely rare. Sarah felt like she was in a dream. 2 hours ago, she had been a nervous coffee shop worker hoping to play some simple background music without embarrassing herself. Now she was surrounded by important music professionals telling her she had extraordinary talent. I do not understand, Sarah said. I was just playing what I remembered. It did not feel that difficult. That is exactly what makes it so remarkable. Dr. Rosenberg explained. Natural musical ability often feels effortless to the person who has it. You were interpreting that piece with an understanding that most students take years to develop. The applause had finally died down, but people throughout the theater were still talking excitedly about the performance. Sarah could hear fragments of conversation. Who is she? Where has she been studying? That was incredible. Michelle Clark, the event organizer, approached the group on stage. Her face was glowing with excitement. Sarah, I hope you realize what just happened. We have recorded every gala for the past 10 years, and I have never seen a reaction like this. Recorded? Sarah asked, suddenly feeling nervous again. Do not worry, Dr. Rosenberg said quickly. We record all our events for the university archives. But what Michelle is saying is that your performance tonight will be remembered as something very special. Professor Hartford was studying Sarah with the intense look of someone making important mental calculations. Sarah, he said, what are your plans for your education? What are you studying at the community college? It's general studies, Sarah replied. I was thinking maybe I would become a teacher someday. What if I told you that you could have a full scholarship to study music at the university? Professor Hartford asked. Full tuition and a living stipend. You could study with Dr. Rosenberg and our other faculty members. Sarah felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. A scholarship? But I do not have the background for a music program. I have not even had lessons in years. Your performance tonight proves you have something much more valuable than years of lessons, Dr. Rosenberg said. You have natural talent and musical instinct that cannot be taught. We can teach you technique and music theory. We cannot teach what you just demonstrated. More people continued to approach Sarah throughout the evening. Business leaders who wanted to support her education, music teachers who had questions about her background, fellow musicians who wanted to understand how someone with so little formal training could play with such remarkable skill. Each conversation reinforced the same message. What Sarah had done was extraordinary and rare. She had revealed a musical gift that most people spend their entire lives developing, if they are fortunate enough to possess it at all. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, many stopped by to congratulate Sarah one more time. The response was overwhelming and consistent. Everyone had been deeply moved by her performance. "I have been attending galas and concerts for 30 years, one elderly gentleman told her. "Tonight was the first time music has moved me to tears in decades." Dr. Rosenberg stayed with Sarah as the theater gradually emptied. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I am in someone else's life," Sarah replied honestly. "This morning I was worried about making minimum wage at the coffee shop. Tonight, people are talking about scholarships and music careers. I do not know how to process any of this." "You do not have to process it all tonight," Dr. Rosenberg said kindly. "But I want you to know that what happened here was real. You have a gift, Sarah, a remarkable, rare gift. The question now is what you want to do with it." As Sarah finally left the theater that night, she carried with her the echoes of applause, the memory of beautiful music flowing from her fingers, and the knowledge that her life had just changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. Sarah walked slowly through the parking lot toward her car, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened. The cool night air felt refreshing after the warmth of the theater, but it did little to clear the fog of amazement that surrounded her thoughts. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Most of the elegant cars had already left, carrying their distinguished owners back to their comfortable lives. Sarah's small, old car sat alone under a streetlight, looking even more humble than usual. As she reached for her car door, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "How did it go? Can't wait to hear everything." Sarah stared at the message, not sure how to begin explaining what had just happened. How could she tell Jessica that she had discovered something about herself that she never knew existed? How could she describe the feeling of playing music that seemed to come from her soul? The drive home was surreal. Sarah found herself replaying the evening in her mind, trying to understand what had really happened. When she had started playing the Chopin Nocturne, it had felt natural and right. Only now was she beginning to understand how extraordinary that was. The words of Professor Hartford and Dr. Rosenberg echoed in her head. Natural musical intelligence, extremely rare talent, cannot be taught. These were concepts that seemed to apply to other people, not to a 19-year-old coffee shop worker who had not played piano seriously in years. When Sarah arrived home, Jessica was waiting up for her, sitting on the couch in her pajamas with a cup of tea. "Tell me everything," Jessica said excitedly as soon as Sarah walked through the door. Sarah sat down next to her roommate and tried to find the words. "I think my life just changed completely," she said quietly. She told Jessica about the beautiful theater, the elegant audience, and how well her planned pieces had gone. But when she got to the part about the Chopin Nocturne, Sarah's voice became softer and more uncertain. "I played a piece I had never learned," Sarah said. "And according to everyone there, I played it better than most people who have studied music for years." Jessica listened with growing amazement as Sarah described the reaction of the audience and the conversations with the music professors. "They offered you a full scholarship?" Jessica asked in disbelief. Professor Hartford said they could arrange it. "Full tuition and living expenses to study music at the university." Jessica grabbed Sarah's hands. "That is incredible. You are going to be a real musician." "But I do not know if I am ready for that," Sarah said. "This morning I was planning to become a teacher. I had my whole life mapped out, simple, safe, predictable. Now people are talking about music careers and conservatories and things I never even dreamed about." "Sarah," Jessica said gently, "what did it feel like when you were playing tonight?" Sarah closed her eyes and remembered the moment. "It felt like coming home," she said. "Like I was doing something I was meant to do. When I was playing that Chopin piece, I felt more like myself than I ever have before. Then you have your answer, Jessica said. Later that night, after Jessica had gone to bed, Sarah sat alone at the old upright piano in their living room. She placed her hands on the familiar keys and played a few notes from the Chopin Nocturne. Even on this simple piano, the music sounded different than it had before. There was something new in her playing, a confidence and expression that had not been there 2 weeks ago. Sarah thought about her childhood piano teacher, Mrs. Johnson, and wondered what she would think about tonight's performance. Mrs. Johnson had always been encouraging, but she had never suggested that Sarah had exceptional talent. Had the ability been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge? The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling like she was living in a different world. She got dressed for work at the coffee shop, but everything felt strange and temporary. Would she still be making lattes and cappuccinos a year from now? Would she still be taking general studies classes at the community college? At work, Tom noticed immediately that something was different about Sarah. How did the fancy gala go? He asked. Sarah tried to give him a simple answer, but Tom could tell there was much more to the story. By the afternoon, she had told him and the other co-workers about the scholarship offer and the professors who thought she had extraordinary talent. "I told you you were good," Tom said with a huge grin. "I could tell just from hearing you hum those classical pieces." Mr. Peterson, the coffee shop owner, was also excited about Sarah's news. "If you decide to take that scholarship," he said, "you will always have a job here if you need extra money. But something tells me you are going to do much bigger things than making coffee." That afternoon, Dr. Rosenberg called to check on Sarah and see how she was processing everything from the night before. "I have been thinking about what you said," Sarah told her, "about the scholarship and studying music. I am interested, but I am also scared. What if last night was just a fluke? What if I cannot do it again?" "Sarah," Dr. Rosenberg said patiently, "what you did last night was not a fluke. It was a revelation of your true musical nature. But I understand your concerns. Would you like to come to the university tomorrow? We could spend some time at the piano, and you could get a better sense of what studying music would involve." The next day, Sarah found herself in a practice room at the university music building. Dr. Rosenberg had brought several pieces of music for her to try. Some she knew, some she had never seen before. What happened next confirmed everything from the gala. Sarah could sight-read music with remarkable ease. She could interpret pieces with emotional depth that impressed Dr. Rosenberg. Most amazingly, she could hear a piece played once and then play it back with stunning accuracy. "This is truly exceptional," Dr. Rosenberg said after watching Sarah work through a complex Mozart sonata. "I have taught for 30 years, and I have never seen natural ability like this." That afternoon, Professor Hartford joined them to discuss the scholarship offer in detail. The music program would allow Sarah to study piano performance, music theory, composition, and music history. She would have private lessons with Dr. Rosenberg and access to the finest practice rooms and instruments. "The program is demanding," Professor Hartford explained, "but I believe you have the natural gifts to succeed. You would be starting with less technical training than some of our students, but you have something much more valuable, an innate understanding of music that most people never develop." As Sarah walked back to her car that afternoon, she thought about the choice in front of her. She could continue her safe, predictable life, working at the coffee shop, taking general studies classes, maybe becoming a teacher. Or she could take a leap into a world she had never imagined for herself. That evening, Sarah sat at the old piano one more time. She played through the pieces she had performed at the gala, but now they sounded different. They sounded like music, made by someone who was beginning to understand her true potential. As she played, Sarah realized that the choice was not really a choice at all. Music was calling to her, and she could not ignore that call. The little girl who had loved piano lessons all those years ago was still inside her, waiting to see how far her talent could take her. 2 weeks later, Sarah submitted her application to transfer to the university music program. She gave notice at the coffee shop. Though Mr. Peterson insisted she could come back anytime she needed work, the transformation was complete. But in many ways, it was just the beginning. Sarah had discovered that she was not just an ordinary girl from an ordinary background. She was someone with an extraordinary gift. And now she was ready to see where that gift would lead her. Years later, when Sarah performed in concert halls around the world, she would remember the night at the university gala as the moment her real life began. It was the night she learned that sometimes the most incredible discoveries are not found in distant places, but hidden inside ourselves, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The scared 19-year-old who had worried about playing background music had become someone confident in her remarkable abilities. But she never forgot the lesson of that magical evening, that life's most beautiful surprises often come when we least expect them, and when we find the courage to reach beyond what we thought was possible.